Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where we take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of big finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week, and today on the 12th of October, 2019, we're starting a story that is perfectly suitable for this most spooky of months. State of Decay, starting with part 1. Now, State of Decay is actually the last story for the Tom Baker years, to be written by Terrance Dicks, taking an idea from his earlier submission that was originally meant to open season 15. But he saved the scripts and he altered them for State of Decay, and you can tell, because simply put, and this is not meant to be a bad mark against the story, mind you. It's being able to tell that this was meant to be an earlier script actually helps, because State of Decay Part 1 starts out very, very atmospheric. It's a story, where you're just dripping with this atmosphere of just like that you can tell, like, ooh, this is a dark. Well, it's not. This is like a darker toned story. You have this world that's entirely built on vampires, and it's a genuinely creepy start to the story. It's like you get the real sense that everything in this story is meant to be just as creepy and as unsettling as possible. It's really, really solid, and something that Terrance Dicks does a great job of building up. Like, there's the story primarily takes place on this planet in E-space. Obviously, we're still in E-space. Basically, it's ruled over by. It's basically this semi-feudal. It's this feudal society ruled over by these lords, who take people into their own little castle, in sort of selection to feed, and they're waiting for the resurrection of, quote unquote, the Great One. Now, what is really cool and nice about this is that what was really cool about this whole story is that building up of the Great One is done so well, because what basically happens is that the Great One is this you don't see him, but you have sort of this, just the general gothic nature of this castle, and that basically by the middle of the episode or so, that, like, yeah, this is vampires, that they're talking about feeding on flesh, that this isn't. And vampire, at least in this first episode, isn't actually said. It's still kind of a mystery to the Doctor and Romana, as they are mostly put in the story as observers. They are there, they're there observing. They're observing the world. They aren't there to be. They are still getting the bottom to the bottom of this society. And while the actual whilst the actual story is built on vampires coming down and attacking, you don't get that much, you don't actually get that much done with them in the tower. You have one of the vampires literally sending servants out to attack them, which leads to a great cliffhanger. But what you do get is that is that you get is that you really get a good sense, um, you know, uh, uh, where you get just this sense of evil, um, evil in the car, in the world. Um, you know, it's it's very much the look at us. Uh, you know, and you get this twist about halfway through the episode, where the Doctor and Romana are basically, um, they find this society of people living basically with this old computer, and like there's this basically the idea is that these vampires may have come from the regular universe, which is a great little twist that just it hits, and it hits hard because you're like, well, that's just something that how is that possible? That's not that's not something that's not right. That's not your standard story. It's something that perhaps should have been, it's a good mystery, and it's something that Terrance Dicks does a really really good job about. Like this first episode has all the making. It has been, honestly, if you're looking at all the episodes of season 18 thus far, at least on television, this is the best one so far. Partially because I think it's by a veteran of Doctor Who, someone who knows, who really knows what he's doing. But the big slight flaw here is that Terrance Dicks doesn't really know what to do with Adric. He just sort of has him wander around outside of the TARDIS, have some conversations with K9, and then leave, and then get himself basically put in the village, as a character. It's not a lot actually happens here. With Adric, he's just kind of he honestly he's just kind of there. He's not really that interesting. So, that that being said, State of Decay Part 1, it's claustrophobic, it's full of gothic horror, it's an amazing start to the story, and an amazing episode overall. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 12th of October 2019, and I just finished watching Part 2 of State of Decay. Now, there's a theme in State of Decay that I'd like to talk about that sort of builds into the theme of Season 18 as a whole. And it's something that we actually see, the theme itself we see built up more and more, and it's built up better and better as we build up towards the conclusion of the season. And that is the theme of entropy. And I mean, obviously, entropy is the idea of chaos tends to increase. That's sort of that's a very, very crude, not entirely accurate way of stating the second law of thermodynamics, is that chaos in a closed system, chaos tends to increase. And just like, especially like Full Circle and then this story are both stories about societies who have sort of almost fallen to chaos. They have become societies where it's where entropy is kind of reigning supreme. It's the entropy is what's controlling these societies. The society is sort of losing itself in a way that it kind of it's building up a sense of a real sense of danger here that that some stories don't entirely do justice to. But the entire society here, the idea is that generations ago, this planet had some technology, like the spaceship crashed. The tower slash castle thing was built up there, and the three who rule have basically been ruling. Their line has been ruling ever since, as technology has decreased. As the three who are vampires have basically been sucking the life out of this community very slowly and sustaining themselves. It's a very interesting way of looking at this story. Is that it's a story about people essentially losing a lot, losing a lot to the chaos of their surroundings, the chaos of their situations, and just chaos in general as it increases and builds and ebbs and flows to a to basically to basically a built up story. The entire story is built on this idea that the plot itself is a you know the plot itself is one of those things where you have where you have a decent sense of you just have a decent sense of where the where you really get where you really get a sense that this society is going crazy. The Doctor and Romana throughout this episode are basically in the custody of the king and queen, Carmilla and Jargo, and they, it's kind of going through sort of that the Dracula tropes of them being the gracious hosts, allowing the strangers into their home very nicely, as sort of a lure to potentially feed on them, it's one of those things where you where you really get a sense that that the big nature of this story is one where you have where you really have a sense, you have this sense of a built up story, and some built up built up just you build up the story around these characters, and building up the story around these characters is important, I think, because it's one of those things where you really have the sense of the story morphing and shifting around trying to be a, you know, a full a full story here. You know, because you have then this build up. You know, Romana cuts herself. Carmilla tries to drink her blood, and like very subtly. The Doctor and Romana, then they figure out that the tower itself is a spaceship. This is where you get some really good melding of science fiction aspects, because there's a lot of sci-fi here. It works really, really well as an episode. And the big cliffhangers, they find the controller, and then Akon's there, the third of the three who rule, and he basically attacks them, while Adric is kind of still not doing much. Like, he gets taken, he basically gets captured by Akon halfway through the episode, and that's it. Like, the Doctor and Romana still don't know that he's there, which is just weird, because it's like, okay, are you gonna... It feels very much like he was added to this story last minute by Terrance Dicks, so they really didn't give him... They haven't given him much to do, which is, you know, kind of a shame, because he's a new companion. He should probably be given something to do. That being said, the episode is still a great episode, so overall I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 13th of October 2019, and I just finished watching part 3 of the State of Decay. Why couldn't I remember the title? I just watched it. And it's a great episode. Mainly because, okay, Adric is barely in this, and that's a plus, because when he is in it, he's hypnotized, and it's weird. Terrance Dicks is able to really make something great out of just having a character be essentially missing for much of the episode. The character is obviously, like, he's is one of those characters who it's one of those characters he's generally annoying, but what's nice is that he's hypnotized. He's basically, like, taken in by the vampires as going to be, like, one of the, sort of, he's either going to be a sacrifice, he's basically going to be, like, one of the chosen, which I guess means, it's not entirely clear what that means, intentionally so, because it's one of those things where it's like, here's something we are, it's basically, here's an idea that we're creating, for, we're creating for this one story, and it's creating just a lot of obvious mystery and misdirection and things like that, because it's genuinely a solid, it's genuinely a solid episode, keeping Adric off screen, because this is one where we get a lot of the backstory of the vampires, that the great vampires were actually, had this war with the Time Lords, and in having this war, there is just this great sense of real fear and sort of just this sort of gravitas that is then basically brought into the story because of that. It's big, and it basically ends up making you basically have a story. It gives you some really, really solid world building. There's also just this great scene of the Doctor and Romana escaping, having them escape it's a lot of which is just a lot of fun to watch because it's the Doctor and Romana being able to escape a tower of vampires, well, because of like the peasant characters coming to rescue them, the peasant characters who had technology, which is great. There's also just this real sense of a almost dark nature to the story. Like the original title, one of the original titles was going to be The Wasting, which isn't the best title, but like the idea that this entire society is wasting away is present throughout the story, and it's really good. I really did enjoy a lot of this a lot of this story. It does a really solid job of introducing concepts and having a lot of fun with playing around with the concepts throughout the story. Basically, so the concepts are really solid. This is a story that that it takes a concept and runs with it. Because Doctor Who versus vampires, like actual gothic vampires, I don't think has actually been done before. Really, it's basically stayed in the background for much of the for much of the book. It really is a solid it really is a solid story overall. Even even if it's not necessarily the best story. Like the entire like a lot of the story works really well on on doing a sort of story where things really make a lot of sense. you know uh, uh, it's basically been a new sort of it's a new sort of story that I think does an excellent job of of completely doing a story overall. It's one of those really solid. It really is just a solid sort of entry. You have the Doctor being Tom Baker being great as the Doctor. Basically, this is just a solid episode and a solid bit of horror, which is a nice change of pace. So overall, I'm going to give State of Decay Part 3 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 13th of October 2019, and I just finished watching Part 4 of State of Decay, the concluding episode to the story, which concludes with, let's be honest, the only way you can conclude a vampire story, with the big vampire getting staked to the heart, which is genuine. It's actually a great ending. It's actually, as an ending, it's a lot of fun to watch, because you have, something like, you have something like this is just sort of like, this is just one of those endings where you really find yourself kind of enjoying how sort of fun it is, because it's one where it's like, yeah, um, here's all this, here are all the, here's all this build up until the giant stake comes through the heart. Now the giant, because this is Doctor Who. This goes, and the idea is that this is a great vampire. It's actually it has to be a giant stake that goes through the heart. Not just a regular sized stake. Just it's like you have it's like which I think is honestly great. I think that's it's one of those. It's just makes it this almost a more. It kind of makes it a little more personal. That it's like, no, it has to be a giant stake, or else it won't work. Because it makes the threat of the great vampire, who we don't actually see at all through this story. You really don't see the great vampire, you know, just at all. It's mostly an off-screen presence, where you get just this sense, where you get kind of a sense of this is one of those stories where you have to kind of suspend your disbelief. Like, we end up seeing what we see of the actual great vampire is only its hand. It's not like we see an actual monster come and try to be basically like, oh, I'm a monster. It's subtle enough that it's the hand. It's something that something that makes plenty of sense when you think about it. Like that, it would be like that. Like something this massive would just be a giant hand, and not like not an actual big villain. And a lot of this episode is just building up the ceremony. As obviously, because you have the Doctor and Romana there, but they are only there because like the Doctor escapes. Romana is going to be sacrificed. Adric basically betrays her. Now let's actually talk about this, because this is the first time this actually happens, and with Adric, there is a sense that he's sort of this. I think the idea is that he's supposed to be untrustworthy, which obviously. Yeah, if he's going to betray the Doctor and Romana, yeah, sure, of course he's untrustworthy. That's not at all trustworthy. It's one of those things where it's like you really get, you really get the sense that the entire idea, like Romana even calls him out on this, and there's something actually really cool about Lalla Ward's performance here. She's kind of she kind of plays the role really subtly and very, very aristocratically. She always has, but it's something where you get this sense that you get this sense of of the characters who really you really get just the sense that Romana is just not taking any of Adric's BS. I will say it's kind of a shame that she gets kind of damseled in the rest of this, which is weird, because you'd think this is a story originally even meant to have Leela in it. So like, did Terrance Dicks just like decide let's damsel a character? It's quite a shame. I thought it would be interesting if there was maybe a reversal here. That could have been interesting, but but as it stands, that's the biggest problem. Now, oddly enough, Tom Baker, he clearly loves this script. He just brings this energy to the part that you kind of were missing in the previous like 4 season 18, like the previous 3 season 18 stories, where he's been more somber. Like, this is obviously a script that he likes, and you get these just flashes of like his Doctor as the previous sort of characterization, not the sort of brooding version, just the more fun and outgoing and let's explore type Doctor, and let's save the day and be amazing. It's something that just Terrance Dicks brings out in Tom Baker as an actor, and it really shines through. And you also just get a really, you also have like sort of this if there was another big problem, is that this story's director, Peter Moffat, in this episode he does really well with the model work, but he doesn't like to sort of frame his shots very well. A lot of shots are just sort of pointed at the camera's just pointed down at the actors, and without really getting an idea for like, here's what the scene should be, and here's sort of where you should be going with it. It's not a very good way of doing this sort of this sort of story. Like, you kind of need just a little more framing here. Like, get up close and personal, get spooky with it. He's just kind of bland with it, which is and he actually directs for I think like through the Peter Davison era, and I think even into the Colin Baker era. And it's just these problems that they'll keep persisting, and it's really something that perhaps should have been stamped out before this episode went out to air, because it is a little distracting, and it does take away from the overall story just a little bit. He does do a good job of showing the vampires crumble to dust, though. Like, he's decent at effect shots, but it's just like action shots, and just sort of sometimes even just like shots where people are talking. They aren't as dynamic as they could be. Sometimes it's just like one long shot. He doesn't know when to cut, or even that he needs to cut a little more, which is just genuinely kind of an annoying thing for the story. But overall, the episode's great. I'm going to give State of Decay Part 4 an 8 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and everything out to give State of Decay a final score of 8.5 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, once again, for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, comment down below your thoughts on the story. Did you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you like the story? Do you hate the story? Let me know. Let's get a conversation going. I always read the comments and try to take time to respond. And of course, join me next time when we conclude the East Space trilogy, and we actually say goodbye to Romana and K9 with the story Warrior's Gate.